guys, I'm Erin and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my favorite fantasy books that I read in 2021. So for this list, I had two rules for myself. One is there are no rereads on this list. These are all books that I read for the first time in 2021, and also no repeats from the same series. So I also combined YA and adult into just one list, so this has both, though it is skewed mostly adult just because I read more adult fantasy than YA fantasy. And yeah, so this is gonna be interesting because I usually have a hard time explaining why I love things. Like for me, especially with fantasy books, like the difference between like a 4-star and a 5-star feeling is kind of just like a gut feeling. Like I just, it more so than like very specific things. So we'll see how well I do saying things that aren't just, oh my gosh, I love this book. And so there are 9 books on this list because as I discovered when reviewing the books I read last year to compile this list, I'm a stingy 5-star giver with fantasy. Not all of these are even 5 stars. So this is 9 books, and these are all of the 5 and 4.5 fantasy I read last year. And that was it. There's only 9 between young adult and adult. And I was gonna do 10 to have a nice top 10 list, but I couldn't decide which single 4-star book to put on this list, so I decided I'm just gonna do 9. Just gonna do 9. And these are all my 4.5 and 5-star fantasy reads from last year. So starting with number 9, The Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty. So this is the second book in the Devabad trilogy, and apparently it's a very shiny cover. So this is the second book, and it's the most recent one I have read. I have not read the third one yet. And this was really just quite a step up from the second one. I really enjoyed the first one, but this one, even better. And in the series in general, I really love the world that S.A. Chakraborty is building here. I think it's really interesting. I love the intricate politics. I've been enjoying the main characters. And what made this one even a step up more for me, getting it on this list over the first one, is that one of the things I struggled with a little bit in the first one was keeping straight kind of a lot of the world building details, like a lot of the lore stories from the world. And in this one, it all just started really clicking. And so I was able to really sink into the characters themselves more, find myself more connected to them and the story than I was in the first one. And I really enjoyed that, and it really got me excited to finish this trilogy. Next, at number 8, is The Reluctant Queen by Sarah Beth Durst. This is the second book. I guess there's a trend here. The second book in the Queens of Renthia series. Unlike number 9, I have read this entire trilogy, and I do think the second one is the best of that entire trilogy. And part of that is I just really liked the main character in this one. It's a different main character from book 1, and then both of them are main characters in book 3, and I just loved Naylin a lot. She is this mother character, and I found her to be really well developed and a very interesting character to follow, and just kind of her perspective on the world, as it were, in this fantasy book is just something different than what I'm used to reading in a lot of fantasies. You definitely don't often get mother characters in fantasy, at least not from what I've been reading. Maybe I've just been reading the wrong things, and I just loved her. I thought she was sympathetic. I just found myself very attached to her very early, and I really love that. Other than that, just as the series as a whole, I really do love this world, this kind of foresty spirit world, and I just love getting more of that in this book. And I found the plot just very engrossing, and yeah, this was definitely the best of the 3 in this series. Number 7 is the first YA fantasy on this list, and that is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. So I picked this up because I loved the movie Coco, and I was definitely interested in picking up books that had a similar premise with the Dia de los Muertos, the Bruja culture, and kind of like the Mexican-inspired kind of fantasy culture kind of that I was introduced to in Coco. I just kind of wanted to read more in that kind of cultural inspiration. So this definitely hit that out of the park. This takes place in our world, just with magic kind of weaved in within our world, with kind of the Brujas magic of this culture, and I really loved it. What really made this kind of stand out to me was how well done the character of Julian was. Julian was kind of the bad boy character, and you could definitely really have the potential to kind of settle into a lot of bad boy stereotypes, and I think it still would have been a good book if they had done that, but Aiden Thomas really took this character and made them great. They made Julian just this really well-developed, interesting, and intricate character, the kind of like the bad boy exterior, and you peel him back into this lot more layers, and I just really liked him as a character, and I think he was definitely my favorite part of the book. But overall, again, I enjoyed the storyline. I thought it was engrossing, and Julian and Yadriel's relationship too, I thought was really cute, and I really loved seeing the progression of that as well. And again, I just really loved kind of being able to read more of this Bruja culture and this like Mexican culture inspired story and setup that I had been introduced to in Coco. Number 6 on this list, and the first of the 5 stars on this list, is Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. I do have a full dedicated review video that I'll link if you want to just hear my fully detailed thoughts, but the short version is, I really love this world. Rebecca Roanhorse really sinks you in and immerses you in her world, and it's a pre-Columbian inspired world, which is not something I've ever read, and I just really liked it. I also, pacing wise, I thought this book was like, it hooked me at the beginning and kept me hooked the whole way through, and then the characters, I loved all the characters. That's kind of an unpopular opinion. I think I see most people who, even people who like the book, don't really like Narampa's point of view, but I did. Like, I liked all of the point of views equally. Like, if I had to choose a favorite, I would probably say Zyala and Serapio's maybe a little bit over Narampa's, but I liked all of them equally while reading. Like, I was equally as interested in every point of view. And then the characters themselves, again, I loved all of them. I think they were all just so interesting, and I felt attached to all of them so quickly, and the cliffhanger this book ends on, I know some people were mad about how much of a cliffhanger this ends on, because it really ends in the middle of a climactic scene, truly. But I don't know, it just hooked me more in the second one, which I cannot wait to read. Next on this list is Flamefall by Rosaria Munda. This one I really debated whether I should put Fireborn or Flamefall, because I didn't really know which one I liked better. They were both amazing, but I did end up choosing this one, which is the second one. And this whole series, I'm kind of going to talk about this as a series, because I like them both, but didn't want to give them 2 separate spots. So this whole series is just so good. I love the way Rosaria Munda portrayed this revolutionary story, and it wasn't a black and white story. We weren't just on the side of the good guys. We were kind of, you get both sides, and you see the good and bad of both sides, which I thought was something I had not felt like I had really read a lot of in YA fantasy. I feel like, at least in YA fantasy, it tends to be not quite as gray all around, and I think she did a great job with that. I also, again, really liked all the character points of views, and the way she puts these characters just through the ringer is so good. It just gets you hooked and attached, and you're sitting there being like, you feel for these characters so much, and you get so mad when they have to make these decisions, and you're like, oh, I don't know what they should do, it's all awful, I just want them to be happy. And I cannot wait for the third one coming out this year, and I hope it will be just as amazing as the first 2. Next up is The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. I've come to realize Tasha Suri is probably very high up on a list of favorite authors if I were to make one. I've really liked everything I read by her, and I think this newest book by her is definitely her best work. It's the first in a new trilogy. Cannot wait for the rest of the series, and it was just so good. I think, again, I have a dedicated review for this one as well that I will link if you want more detailed thoughts, but the world was amazing. Her world building is just so lush, and the way she flushes out all these different cultures. She did this, in this one, she kind of explores not just like the different cultures, but what a country's culture is like when another country is like pushing out their culture and kind of taking it over, and I thought that was a very fascinating kind of world building perspective to live from, or read from, not live from. We also had this trio of kick-ass women main characters that I loved, all of them. They were just so well developed, so unique, and they all had these great individual voices, and she did a wonderful job of really building out these different kinds of women characters that I really liked. I also really, really loved the way religion played its part in the story. I like religious aspects to fantasy books. I just think it's an interesting thing to add to your fantasy world, and I really like the way this one was added, because it wasn't a good religion, it wasn't the bad guy's religion, it wasn't this neutral third party. It was a very morally gray religion as far as its place in this world, which I loved. I also thought the religion itself was very interesting as far as its practices and tenets and things, so very much enjoyed that. Yeah, again, I'm very excited for the sequel, something I'm saying a lot in this video. Next up is, number 3 on this list, is Jade Legacy by Fonda. Wow, does Fonda know how to stick a landing of a series. This was just incredible. I'm also, in addition to just being a fantastic conclusion to this trilogy, the way she was able to do a book spanning so many years flawlessly was very impressive. I never felt like she skipped over too much. Like, I never felt like she put too much into the book to cover this much time. I never felt like she'd overpacked it. I never once was like, this really should have been 2 books with how much she's covering. I also never felt like she skipped over too much to get through these years. Like, it just really felt right. It felt right, the amount of time she spent, and just the way these character arcs ended and kind of developed into the end of their stories in this trilogy was just impeccable. So good. Amazing ending to a series. Number 2 book on my list is A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. I love this book, but this book is one of those really not for everyone. It has a school setting, which I love, so like already checking boxes on things I like a lot. And then I love the main character of this book, and that's really what put this at a 5-star, I think, was just my love for the main character and reading from her point of view. It's a very stream of conscious narration, which is definitely a hit or miss for you depending on how you feel. For me, it really worked, and like it was kind of info dumpy, but the way the narrative was written in this stream of conscious made the info dumps work really well for me. Like they felt right, and just in the way the story was being told, that she would pause. Like if you were just like telling someone all this stuff and then you get to something you realize they don't know, you just like pause and tell them. And you know, maybe that's just because that's the way I tell stories. Like I'll tell a story and then pause and be like, oh, we got to this thing, I need to give you some background on that thing before we can move on. And you know, as I'm literally talking about this now, I realize maybe that's why it works so well, is because that's the way I will tell long-winded stories to people. And you know, people probably find that annoying. And that's fair. But here we are. I loved it. It worked for me. I also thought she was delightfully snarky and cynical, and it was just very amusing. I just had a great time being in her head. I just like love that kind of snarky humor, and it really worked for me. So, number 2. And then the number 1 book I read, or the number 1 fantasy book I read, though this would probably be the number 1 book across genres, if we're being honest. I have not thought about across genre list, but it would probably be number 1. And if you've seen any of the videos in which I talk about this series in it, you probably would not be surprised. But number 1 book on this list of 2021, number 1 fantasy book, is The Bone Ship's Wake by R.J. Barker. I just adore this series and this book so much. If nothing else, this book earned its spot as number 1 purely by being the only book in 2021 out of 180 some odd books I read. This was the single only one that made me cry. I ended this book crying. I had the book open on my lap, I closed it, sat on my couch, just tears running down my face. It was amazing. Talking about sticking the landing again, a theme with, you know, with the series ending books on this list, I think there's 2. It's just sticking the landing, and wow, does R.J. Barker do that. It's just the journey these characters go on is amazing. The way the plot's rounded out is so good. It just hits you so hard. Again, I cried in a good way. And yeah, I could just like wax poetic about this series. When I was like prepping for this video, I was just thinking about how amazing this series is, and I really should do a series review, maybe why you should read, why I love it kind of video on this whole series. But just to say, other things I loved about it, it's a nautical fantasy. I adore nautical fantasy settings so much, and the world R.J. Barker built in this book is so rich. It's so interesting, and there's just so much you could dig into with this world and the themes in it, and kind of how the world itself is kind of an antagonist to a lot of the story, more so than any single person is. It's just so interesting. And yeah, I just adore the series. I don't want to spend tons and tons of time just waxing on about this one book, but needless to say, it's just so, it's so amazing. I just like don't even have the words. Yeah, I adore the series. I read the second book this year as well, but I think the third book is definitely the one that earns its place on this list over the second one, just because, again, the way it sticks the landing is just so good. So yeah, I could just go on and on, so we're gonna stop. So those are my top 9 favorite fantasy books I read in 2021. If you've read any of these, let me know what you thought. Let me know what your favorite fantasy books were that you read last year, and I will see you in my next video.